those are probably familiar sequence of chords to you if you're a classical guitar lover, as you probably recognize the piece being the first study or first etude by Villa-Lobos, the Brazilian composer, which is the first of 12 concert etudes he wrote for the guitar. And now these pieces are great for every aspiring, classical guitar virtuoso, professional, amateur even. They're just such hard-hitting, but also hard-hitting pieces for the listener, but also for the player to improve his technique, both left hand and right hand. And this etude, I think, is really interesting because a lot of people think of it as an etude of arpeggios for the right hand. So if you look at the right hand, it's very interesting. You have P, I, P, I, P, M, I, A, M, A, I, M, P, I, P, I, and that repeats. That's the fingering that we've been given in the score. Someone once pointed out another fingering to me, which is actually the one that I prefer to use when playing the piece through, which is P, I, P, I, P, M, I, A, M, P, I, P, I. So you'll notice when I say that I, A, in the original edition of the score, I think it's given as an M, A, but I use IA because I find that MA is a little bit difficult on the right hand to sustain over a long period of time, and we can talk about that in depth more later. I'll get to that maybe later in this video or in another video. But I really want to talk about the left hand, which is, I think, not what people really think of when they think of the study. But actually the left hand is a great exercise in the study for, how to do somewhat challenging chord shifts. So the thing about an arpeggio is, unlike a chord, where you basically hit all the notes together, so all the notes have to be planted on the left hand before you strum the chord, an arpeggio spaces out those notes. So you would have... So what this means, if you follow my logical conclusion, is that you don't need to have the whole left hand of the chord planted before you play the arpeggio. You can plant it sequentially. And that to explain that jargon, I'll show you what I mean. So we start on an E minor chord. That's the first chord. When we play it as an arpeggio, we get this. And then we move to this chord. Now if we were to play this as two chords, strummed chords, we'd have, and then we'd have, and you'll notice, and I haven't really been practicing this etude very much, which is also why I got the idea to make this video, because I'm a little out of practice with this, and I started to realize what are the complicated parts about this etude technically. What's complicated or getting it to work without the little technical, let's say, mishaps or the gaps that sort of make it a little bit harder to present in concert or in performance. What are those things that are challenging, and why is it a good etude? So if you have this chord, and then you have to immediately go to this chord, so you'll hear a gap. Why? Because you change positions on the left hand, so you lose the sound for a moment. Even if I don't cut with the right hand, there's a gap. Now, when you play it as an arpeggio study, you can avoid any kind of gap in between the chord transition. No silence, no conspicuous moment of transition. You can make it very smooth. So for example, you have... Now you'll notice that I did that without any gap this time. And the reason is that I can sequentially plant the second chord. So let me do that in slow motion, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I get the F sharp first, the E minor. Now I have an open E low, F F sharp, now I plant the C, now I plant the A on the third string. And the last finger that gets planted is the C on the second string up here. Let's do that one last time and look very carefully. And you can make this process very streamlined. And in fact, you should. If you're ever thinking about performing this piece or really taking it on seriously as something you want to use to build your technique, build your repertoire, build your performing skills, build your stamina on stage, what you really need to work on in this piece is making this sequential planting between the chords. You need to make it perfect. So the way I just did it now, it worked. But I wasn't that comfortable with it because I haven't been practicing this recently. And the goal is to make it so easy that your fingers, you don't really have to think about sequential planting, you just do it. And of course that means a lot of practice where you're not just doing it, where you do have to think about it till you get to the point where that kind of thing happens automatically. It just, your body knows what to do. So let's look at, the first few chords and you'll see that it's quite good for all of that. Sounds great, but it's really easy compared to the rest.